Okay, well, hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Aquarius Rising Africa, or Australia, actually, with our focus on Australia. It is so good to have Ash back with us again for chapter 3 of our previous interviews, and of course, the beautiful Glam Gabby, who always looks so gorgeous. How are you two? How's it going there?
Very
Very
good. Thank
good.
you.
Thanks for having us, as always.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure. My favorite time. So good to have you back. Anyway, but Ash, I'm so chuffed that we're going to be talking more about the stuff, sort of leading on to what we spoke about the last time, which is you had a sexual relationship with your psychologist, which I would be very interested to hear more about because I also think that that's probably a lot more common than what we even realize. And I would imagine, especially in the survivor community. So it'd be very interesting to, especially when there's reprogramming done, right? I would imagine that would be part of the reprogramming. But anyway, I look forward to hearing everything that you have to say about that. And we're going to talk about other cool things as well. So, yeah, over to you guys.
Cool. So where we left off last time, I think, was trafficking and my childhood. Moving on from then. So I'm going to start from when I was 17, after I graduated from high school, in the holidays between high school and uni. I was involved in a fire, and in this fire, I sustained 85% third-degree burns to my body. And I was immediately rushed to hospital where they performed surgery on me for 32 hours straight. In Australia, we have a fantastic public health system, and I'm just so indebted and so grateful for the care that I received. So I spent nearly a year in hospital. It was a big part of my life, and it was a huge recovery. For me, what I learned in hospital was a sense of self-worth. I learned that my life had value, and that my life was worth living and that I was worth fighting for. And that's what the Burns team and the staff at the Royal Brisbane and Women's Hospital really instilled in me. And I'm forever grateful for the treatment and the care that I received there.
Wow, that's beautiful.
It was quite a challenge. And, you know, I was in ICU for nearly for six and a half weeks. And then I was moved to the Burns unit for a number of months. I had to learn to breathe again on my own, walk, talk, learn all of my skills again. I nearly lost my voice completely. So we weren't even sure if I was going to be able to get that back. Very fortunate and very lucky for the care that I received that I was able to get that back. And my quality of life was sort of unknown. So it was a big treatment, and it was very challenging and very tough. You know, I had in total over the course of my burns treatment, which has gone on for many years, I had 99 GAs and a number of other local surgeries. And as I said to my surgeons, can we do one more and make it 100? But no, they said, no, let's just cap it at 99 and we're done. So
Wow.
that was pretty big. But in terms of
It
burns
is
treatment,
insane. I mean, I'm sorry, but I'm sitting here trying to process someone having 99 surgeries. I've had one in my life, and that was when my tonsils were taken out.
yeah, very
And
painful.
I was, wow.
It's massive.
That, and I love what you said, Ash, about what you discovered about yourself during the time you're in hospital. Because for me, I always know that, you know, as crazy as what that is and as hectic as what having third-degree burns must be like, I believe God really works in mysterious ways. And that would have been God's way of rescuing you from literally the fires of hell in so many ways, so to speak, you know. And just for you to then realize through so many earth angels in the hospitals, it gives me back my faith in humanity to know that after you went through what you did, there were these amazing angels, literally these earth angels that were there for you and taught you the value of your life. That is a really beautiful thing. Yeah.
I completely agree. Thank you. Yes, very, very much. I'm indebted to them. My life is indebted to them. And I always think of them in everything that I do. And I owe all of my success in life to them. I always say that. And they had a huge impact on my life. Some memorable moments that I had in hospital, drinking a Whopper burger from Hungry Jack's through a straw. That was one of the most delicious things that I've ever eaten in my entire life. Picture this, you haven't eaten food in a very long time. You get a little bit of mint, not very nice. Then you're presented with this beautiful Whopper burger. Gorgeous, delicious.
That is amazing, actually. I can't imagine. But yeah, if you say it's delicious, okay, I'll take your word for it. I can't imagine that I'd be rushing to get mine like that. But anyway.
So yeah, I think for me, you know, I did, in the end, I got some pretty halfway decent results with burns. So the thing about burns treatment is that every single centimeter and every single inch of movement that you get back after your surgery is through stretching and physical stretching. So you have to essentially tear open the skin to get that movement back. So it's very, very painful and very, very challenging treatment. And, you know, I had my physio one day say to me, you know, Ash, I don't know how, you know, I've never had somebody say, I want to do more, I want to work harder. How could you possibly, you know, say that? And I simply responded, I've been through worse. And that was all that I said. And of course, I was alluding to my childhood and trafficking and the sadistic sexual abuse. So burns treatment is very challenging. It's very hard. But for me, it was a lot easier than other people. And I was able to get pretty good results because of that. In 2018, I was just like sitting in the hospital and I'd gone up with my nana to support her for an appointment. And I bumped into one of my old OTs and she said, you know, Ash, we use your results from what you achieved at conferences when we traveled the world because as like a very high standard. And I was really shocked and surprised by that. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. But I realized that was A, because of my childhood, and B, because of the care and the treatment that I received. The burns team that we've got in Brisbane is, I fundamentally believe, one of the best teams in the world. And all of my success and all the movement and the quality of life that I've achieved has been because of them. So I owe everything to them and they're absolutely incredible. I can't stress that enough. But yeah, another important seminal moment in that situation was I hadn't seen my face yet. And I said to the nurses, look, I want to see my face. And, you know, the nurses kind of freaked out. They had to have a team meeting. They didn't want me to see my face. They weren't sure if I was ready. Bear in mind, at the time, I'm 17. And they're thinking, oh, a teenager's going to freak out. So they were umming and ahhing. They had a meeting. They finally decided it was going to be okay. I'm thinking, my God, what, you know, if they're freaking out, I'm freaking out. I'm thinking, what's happened? My nose is melted off. You know, my face like drooped. I had no freaking idea what was coming at me. So they came in with this mirror and I was like, oh yeah, I look pretty good, don't I? I pulled up pretty good like this. Looking pretty good, guys. Done a good job. And they were like, what? But I was very shocked and surprised that I didn't have any ears because I could hear perfectly well, but I didn't realize that my ears had been burnt off. So that was a little bit of a shock. But, you know, that for me was a seminal moment, but also it's important in this story because having a new face is very confronting and very challenging, and you're forced to reshape your identity about who you are. And a lot of burn survivors go through a huge period of, you know, the dichotomy between the face that you've always known and this new face that you've got. It's very challenging and hard to accept. And also accepting the fact that you've got a facial disfigurement, and it's very confronting in society. You know, people stare at you, people look And it's just a new way of existing in the world. And that's something that you have to navigate. So in that first year, you know, that was something that was a challenge and was hard for me to deal with. And also wearing the burn suit. So when I got out of hospital, I was in a full burn suit. So it was like my whole head was covered. There's just holes for the eyes, the nose, the mouth, and the ears. And I had just these little blonde tufts of hair coming out. And I would walk around like that, and my toes and the tips of my fingers, they were the only things that were showing. So I was walking around. I had to wear that burn suit for 2.5 years. And it wasn't like it is these days, where people are pretty accepting of facial disfigurements and burn suits, and they're aware of what burns actually are. And there's awareness about it. People didn't know what it was. People were freaking out. I had people yelling out of their cars, you know, stuff about BDSM, like, oh, you're a slave, you're a sub. You know, people had no idea what the hell was going on. And look, I'm not, you know, opposed to that, of course, but that wasn't why I was wearing it. And, you know, it was just as a, you know, 17, 18, 19-year-old, you know, that was a bit of a challenge to go through. So I was dealing with all of that on top of, you know, trying to wrap my head around, I guess, the trauma of everything that I'd gone through. So
Can I ask, Ash, when you
yeah.
were the treatment team that you were with, who was so fantastic in
Yeah.
Brisbane, did they become aware, and did you share with them what you'd been through as a child and sort of what had brought you up to that moment? It was kind of like quite separate, the trauma.
It
So
was
they
very
hadn't-
separate. No, they didn't know, but it became very apparent, you know, really in terms of my parents and my family, as I got better and as it became clear that I was going to survive, they visited less and less, and eventually they rarely, you know, ended up, they didn't visit that much, you know, my parents. So, and then over the course of, after I was discharged from hospital, you know, very, very little support. And that was noted and commented on, just because it's part of treatment for them to note and comment on these things as a person's support. So while they didn't know that I'd been abused, I think they certainly were. It was very obvious and very apparent that something was very wrong. And when I, because I had to go back for further surgeries every couple of months after I was discharged from my long stay in hospital of a year, I had an incident where my sister came in and she'd been injured by my father, and so they actually made a report to the Department of Child Safety regarding that incident, and I think they sort of realized then that there was obviously a lot more going on. But I'm, you know, I was very stoic and very strong within myself. I didn't talk about it, you know, I just did my absolute best. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for explaining that.
Yeah, no worries. Oh shit, what was I gonna say? So I was in hospital for a year, and I went to rehab, and then when I got discharged from there, I had to go back home. So I was, at this point, I was still, so what happened when I was in ICU was basically when you're not moving your arms, calcium deposits actually built up in my elbows. And what they did was they wrapped themselves around their ulnar nerve. The ulnar nerve is responsible for all the movement in all of your fingers. It's very critical. So I was unable to bend my elbow. So I got the maximum amount of stretch, because that had to be dealt with first. We had to do all of my burns treatment, and then we had to deal with the orthopedic operations. But that operation I needed to go on a waiting list for. And it wasn't until about, well, I think it was 11 or 12 months out of hospital that I got that operation. So I had very limited movement, and your elbows are critical for reaching your mouth, you know, washing your hair, pulling up your pants, that kind of thing. So when I was discharged from hospital, I was unable to pull up my pants. I was unable to clothe myself. I was unable to feed myself without an extended kind of like fork. And so I was really in no shape to go anywhere except home, unfortunately. So I was forced to really go back home to my parents and to that situation. When I got back home, Sorry, Gabs, you go.
No, I was just saying, I was just feeling for you, like just going from
Yeah.
such a
Me too.
recovery to sort of, like back into that evil.
Yeah, pretty much. So it was a challenge. Didn't want to do it, but I didn't really have a choice. And but I was going back as a very, very different scenario. I was physically very weak because of the fire. I'd lost. So basically, the burnt through a lot of my muscle and my bone that's never been able to return, and my fat, of course. Luckily, I was chunky dunk at the time. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't be here. So, people that are like, you should always be skinny. I don't know about that. Do you know what I'm saying? Like people that are like fat, they've stopped bullets. People that are burnt and fat, the fat just burns down. That's it, baby. So anyway, I got like a weight reduction, which was pretty good. I got a nose reduction as well. I always didn't like my big nose, but that just got like half burnt off. So there's a lot of good things that came out of it. But anyway, so, I was weak and I was struggling a little bit and I was feeling very vulnerable psychologically and physically, but doing my best, of course. And I had to go back into that environment where I was always forced to physically defend myself and defend my sister. And I was now completely unable to do that. And I was very reliant on my parents for care. And that was a huge challenge. But nevertheless, it was all good. And, my siblings were very, very supportive. They were wonderful and awesome. And anyway, my father, so he had this kind of thing. He basically told everybody and said that I was not only mentally ill, but I had bipolar and that I needed to be prescribed lithium. So if you give lithium to somebody that doesn't have bipolar, essentially instead of cutting off the manic highs of a bipolar, it just cuts off your joy, your happiness, your good positive feelings, and it makes you really, really depressed. Now, I'd made a solemn promise to the doctors that I would always be grateful for this gift of life that they'd given me, and that I would never throw it away or, dismiss it. I wouldn't try to kill myself. I wouldn't try to do anything like that, out of respect for all the hard work and energy and money and time, not only them, but all the taxpayer money that's gone into our public health system and Medicare that have been given to me. I just felt so grateful for this second chance and I didn't want to waste it. So I didn't want to do that. And I said, Dad, I'm not doing it. I'm not going back on lithium. You're not putting me on it. And he said, well, you don't have a choice. And I said, I tried to bargain with him and I said, what about if I go to another psychologist and I get a new diagnosis? And the psychologist said that I don't need to be on lithium. If they want to prescribe an antidepressant, happy to take it, not a problem. And he said, I'll think about it. And he said, I'm thinking about if you don't want to take your medication and you don't want to be mentally well, then you're not welcome to live in my house. So at that point, I was in a bit of a bind because I would probably die from malnourishment. I'm not joking. If I didn't have anybody to help feed me. And so I was kind of like, what should I do? And then he said, look, it's okay. See a psychologist, get that diagnosis, and you can stay in my house until then. So I was like, phew, cool. Went to my GP, got a referral to see a psychologist, and went and met this psychologist. My father backflipped and said, actually, doesn't matter that you're seeing a psychologist, you got to take the lithium anyway. And I basically was like, fuck you, that's not happening. So I got in contact with a school friend who was unaware of just how disabled that I was, and I moved out with her. I was very, very grateful and lucky that she took me in. But that year was incredibly challenging. I mean, I was unable to feed myself, clothe myself. I had absolutely no money. I got on Centrelink, which is like welfare in Australia. But all of that just went to Blue Nurse Care. They came for an hour a day and they helped dress me and take me to the toilet and shower me. That's about it. I was so poor, I couldn't even really afford food anyway. I was just starving for like a year. But I was okay. I sometimes ate when I went up to the hospital. When I let them know that hadn't eaten in like 4 days, they're like, okay, we'll give you a meal as part of your, physio. So that's what kept me going. But anyway, I got referred to this psychologist and I decided to engage in treatment because I obviously had to address these issues from my childhood and everything that I'd gone through. And I was committed to doing that. So I was referred by my GP to a psychologist by the name of Tamara Smith and her practice Dynamic Psych Solutions in Brisbane. It was a very small private practice based out of Wollongabba. And upon meeting her, my opinion of her was that she was very moral, very ethical, very kind, generous-hearted, just a beautiful person. And she said that, look, it's going to take a couple of sessions for me to decide whether or not I can take you on as a patient, depending on whether or not I can fulfill your needs and things like that. And she agreed to do that. And I felt very, very grateful. I had a huge sense of respect for health professionals at this point, going through what I'd gone through in hospital. And she presented me with this really ethical, by all accounts, ethical appearance on the surface. And I very much believed it and bought into that. Yes, but what I would like to discuss today is what happened in treatment and what subsequently I escaped from afterwards, but has happened to a number of other patients. And it's a very, very serious issue that needs addressing. And I've got a number of opinions on that, which I will express and share. So I went to hospital when I was 17. I had my 18th birthday in hospital. And it was a couple of months before my 19th birthday that I was discharged. So when I went to see this psychologist, I was 19 years of age. I was in a full burn suit. I was still having operations every couple of months. I'd moved out of home. I was in a state of vulnerability, as I've mentioned, and I began treatment with her. The first couple of months was just building trust. She really worked really, really hard to build my trust and earn my trust. And we just built a really healthy therapeutic relationship. And I came to believe that she had my best interests at heart and my well-being at heart. And so I decided to engage fully in treatment with her. She worked from a schema therapy modality of therapy. And at the time I was studying psychology at university. I wanted to be a psychologist prior to this. And so I looked into that form of therapy, and she asked me, look, do you agree to this modality being used? Do you feel comfortable? And I said, yes, I do. So we began and embarked on this journey using schema therapy techniques. And schema therapy is basically a form of therapy that is legal and ethical. And basically it's based on forming an attachment, a strong attachment between a patient and a psychologist. And the psychologist will create a healthy environment where a patient who has experienced either abuse or a lot of dysfunction in their life and instability will eventually, over time, with an objective therapeutic relationship in a healthy environment, play out all of those emotions and feelings until they become stable within themselves. Mm. So that's what we began to embark on. However, there were things going on behind the scenes that I was unaware of at this point. And I thought that we were just engaging in a normal, healthy, therapeutic relationship, but we weren't, unfortunately. And this came to a forefront when she asked me to think of a situation where I felt invalidated by my parents that was followed by a sexual scenario or a scenario in which I was nude. And she said that this was because it evoked feelings of vulnerability from childhood. And we would discuss that. We would re-script that memory with her in that memory to create healthy attachment. This is all like perfectly ethical. Yeah. So we went through this memory and she changed her tone of voice to kind of a hypnotic programming type of voice, very slow, very calm, very measured. And we slowly went down and discussed this memory. And in this memory, I was 10 years of age. I had been attacked by my father, violently attacked, strangled, and abused. And then my mother called him into the room and they proceeded to have sex. I went to my room, lay on my bed and bawled my eyes out while I listened to them have sex in the next room. So we went through this memory, and Tamara placed herself in the position of a caregiver as my mother. And instead of my mother calling my like dad in this memory. She's instilled in herself as a mother. She came and she saved me. She saved me from that attack. She held me. This is all just like words. We're just talking. I've got my eyes closed. I'm in a subconscious kind of a state. The subconscious is engaged and in a peaceful kind of a state. And she said, "Can you feel my arms around you?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Mummy's here. Mummy's holding you. It's going to be okay." And I said, "Thank you, Mummy. I appreciate it." And I very much felt that I was in, I'd regressed back into the feelings of that I had when I was 10 years of age. And as she was saying these things and we were engaging with each other, I began to hear the sexual noises. And I sort of thought, is this in the therapy room, or is this like just from my memory from my parents having sex and hearing my mum moaning from the memory? But I wasn't sure, and we continued on with this therapeutic rescripting, imagery rescripting. And then I came out of it, and in the end, I felt a profound sense of healing, happiness, joy, and a connection with Tamara that I'd never experienced before. The love between a mother and a child. And I'd bonded with her in such a way. Now, imagery rescripting should never be used in that way. You don't put yourself in the position of a parent and call yourself mummy. That's not what happens. But worse still, when you're in that state of vulnerability, a childlike state, and somebody has sexualized it, and I found out later that she was sexually moaning. She was not only aroused by the experience, but this was part of her programming techniques. I had unconsciously connected therapeutic healing with sex.
Okay.
That sort of was a seminal moment in our treatment where the sexual abuse began. And this was 5 months into treatment. Now, what had been going on sort of prior to that point, I believe she'd been getting information about me without my knowledge, not just from me, but from my dad. And the reason why is because of what happened in future sessions. And basically, she began to give me, at the beginning of session, in the therapy room, a micro dose of drugs. And what this would do, it would put me in a drugged state. She would then enact punitive measures, and she found out about my deepest, darkest secrets in this compromised state of being drugged. And she found out that one of my deepest fears, apart from obviously, watching children and women being murdered, was like cockroaches. And I'm very, very scared of cockroaches, just because of like what I discussed in the previous videos, the entree, how kids are often taken into these situations and covered with cockroaches and bugs, and it's a very scary thing when you're very, very young, 2, 3, 4 years of age. So this was being done at our home and in trafficking, as I mentioned previously. But basically what this meant is, at home, when my father involved cockroaches at a young age, it meant that something very, very sadistic was about to happen, and I was going to be threatened with my life. So under this state of being drugged, Tamara would become a cockroach, and she would put me in a state of vulnerability of either 2, 3, or 4, and I would feel as if I was a tiny child under the influence of these drugs, and this cockroach was coming to get me. And it sounds really weird, but she had must have had like a tape or something, and a sound of like fluttering wings. So fluttering cockroach wings, because I'm scared of like flying cockroaches. Because I was put in rooms with flying cockroaches in the dark, in the pitch black, for hours as a kid. It's one of the things that was done to me. I was very, very scared when I was very young, like at 2 years of age. So I was terrified of this. And then basically what she would do, this is just a stereotypical form of MK Ultra programming. Punitive measures are enacted. Our deepest fears and our core deepest state of attachment is elicited. We're terrified beyond belief. And then we're presented with a way out of that situation. How do we get out? And the way out of that situation was a sexual situation involving Tamara. And once she would come into the room, you know, the cockroach is gone. I'm here to save you, Ash. It's all going to be okay. We can find a way out. We just have to do this. Let's connect with mummy. And this sexual situation would occur. Bear in mind, I'm completely and totally drugged at this point. I don't know what's going on. As the therapy continued, so this was when I was being drugged. When the drugs began to wear off, we began to have a normal type therapy. But as time went on, as is the nature of not just programming, but psychopathy, we know that psychopaths, you know, they get less and less sexually satisfied as time goes on. And she became more and more, you know, sexually unsatisfied. And so sex became the primal focus of our therapy together. And I fundamentally believe that it wasn't simply just about getting her sexual needs met, but it was about another goal that she had. And unfortunately, this goal, she wasn't just into me, her patient, but she was also into children. So she has a mummy-child kink. So it's like a dom sub kink with her positioned as a mother with her 2 children. And ideally, she likes a patient and a patient's younger sibling, or a young patient and the patient's young child. That's what gets her sexually aroused. So she really tried to pressure me to bring my siblings into therapy. I refused to do it. And she really impressed on me that I was a perpetrator. She set me masturbation as homework to help me accept my sexuality. And she sexualized the therapeutic process again and again and again. And she was very, very skilled at what she did. She was always kind and sweethearted, gentle, never raised her voice, and was able to elicit certain responses within me. But because of the fact that I was being drugged and these punitive measures were being enacted outside of my conscious awareness, and I wasn't made aware of it completely until later, I couldn't really understand what was really going on. I couldn't really figure it out, and I couldn't really join all the dots because we weren't having outright sex. At times there was just mutual masturbation, or her watching me masturbate and discuss sexual situations with her. And what she liked also was hearing about sexual situations with children. She pressured me to have sex with children outside of therapy. And really her intent and goal was to traffic me, to turn me into a sexual perpetrator and a pedophile.
Can I just, sorry to chime in here, this is a very important part, so please just hold that thought. There's 2 things I'd like to ask you. You said she drugged you in microdoses before or at the beginning of the sessions. Right. So were you aware you were being drugged? No. So you didn't know? Okay, so no. She was obviously putting that in something you were drinking or what have you, right?
My water, yeah, my water, yeah. So she was always very adamant about me being hydrated and she would always wait to start the session until I was feeling calm and relaxed after I'd taken a moment, had a breather, had my water or my tea. And obviously I didn't know about this until later. And I can discuss this like further. It's not just an accusation that I'm making without evidence. I have evidence for what happened. It's just that at this point, I couldn't connect all the dots.
Yes, absolutely. Wow.
Yeah. So I began to get really resistant and really sick of this. Look, I've been trafficked as a child. I was very resistant, even at 2-3 years of age, as we previously discussed. It's very, very hard to traffic me. Getting to turn me into a perpetrator, that's a huge stretch, even under all of these beta programming methods. Even with somebody with her exceptional skill set. The woman is brilliant. She's incredible at what she does. She's one of the best programmers in Australia, I fundamentally believe, unfortunately. But, I'm a bit of a nightmare, as we all know, and very, very resistant to these things. So I was starting to get sick of it. I was starting to get frustrated. And I said, look, Tam, I just can't get on board with this. I've thought about this thousands of times. I've gone over it in my mind. I I don't genuinely believe that I'm struggling with feelings for children. I don't genuinely believe I have sexual feelings for you. You know, I was very open about this and transparent about it. And of course that was all programmed and
I was
into
going
me.
to say she's programmed that into you. What a calculated monster. It's like she just had a set of agendas she was just rolling out. Like, it's so easy looking back, you know, now from the vantage point of being able to reflect, but how scary for you as a vulnerable person coming in after what you just experienced with your burns and having just someone that is so scheming but yet seeming so nice. Like, it's almost like you couldn't really go against her because it was so cunning.
Deception.
And you make a great point. You know, I was very, very vulnerable, and dealing with this new face was very hard. I didn't feel sexually attractive. You know, one of the first things that I said when I woke up was, will I ever be able to have sex again? You know, for me, I love sex. I'm a highly sexual being. I'm very healthy sexually, and, you know, I love women. So for me, that was a big deal. And it's the way that I connect with people. One of the ways, of course, I'm just very extroverted. That's who I am. So, you know, I just felt I didn't feel sexually attractive. And she really was constantly telling me that I was beautiful, that I was in looks and in personality, that kind of thing. That was all part of the grooming process, of course. But, you know, all of this kind of played into facilitating this connection. And not only that, there's a woman that's, you know, 13 or 14 years my senior. She's absolutely stunning. She's perfectly my type, incidentally. And, you know, it was just all set up really to facilitate this relationship.
I was actually about to ask you that, because we've so often heard other overcomers speak as well, you know, about this sort of thing and how their marriages are set up and stuff like that in the most unobvious ways. So I find this interesting. How is it kind of like a psychic thing that happens between the survivor community, not the survivor, but, you know, with the programmers, that they kind of just link onto you psychically because we know they can do that, and therefore they will draw you in? Because it seems to me in your situation, you chose the therapist, right? You were the one that decided that was the therapist you wanted. It wasn't like your dad forced her upon you or something like that. So I'm interested how that came about, just from your understanding.
So, it was a GP referral. And looking back, look, to be honest, I do not know to this day, and I'm not going to state on video whether or not I was intentionally sent to her or not. But, you know, I don't know. I'll never know. But it, you know, it was very random. That's all I can say. It was hugely accidental.
Just from the perspective of what a programmer would want, so what someone like Tamara would be looking for would be someone that is able to dissociate, so someone that is from multi-generational trauma and definitely survivors, child sexual abuse, torture, you know, horrific childhood events, alcoholism and drugs being used in the family. Those kind of things would tick all the boxes for what would be a valuable, you know, we could say asset to them, for them to be able to install programming on. So we can't say for sure, but it's interesting, isn't it?
Very, very interesting. And look, in my family, we don't have any drug or alcohol problems. Unfortunately, my father doesn't have a reason for being as evil as he is. But I do understand your point. And yes, it's very much intergenerational abuse, and what I experienced. And, you know, it was just, I don't know for sure, but like the skill set that she has and what she was able to do, the programming that she was able to inflict, you know, and the goal that she had, her ultimate goal in the end that I was unaware of at this point. So I've gone in blind to this situation, as is every person that walks through those doors. And, you know, I tried to leave a number of times, but unfortunately my father at this point didn't know that I had remembered that he was a serial killer and like a serial rapist and all of the abuse. So I was very scared, and the threat to my life was very real. My father has tried to kill me a number of times as an adult. He's nearly succeeded on one occasion. And, you know, I was really put in a situation where she's got all my secrets. And I wanted to believe that she was a good person, and I didn't have all the pieces to the puzzle. But look, I said, look, I really don't agree with this stuff. You know, it's I'm kind of not into it. This was about 9 months in, and she cracked the shit and said that basically, I'm telling your family that you're a sexual perpetrator, that you're a danger to children. I'm having a conversation with your father. She didn't say what it was about. But, you know, that elicited a lot of fear within me. And then she said, I'm filing a report with the police, and I'm reporting to them that you are a pedophile, and they will investigate you for sexual crimes against children. So I was, she terminated therapy, and I was investigated. I had an interview with police regarding sexual crimes against children, and I spoke with them at length. They took my laptop and my computer. They found obviously no child pornography. There was no evidence that I was abusing anybody, my siblings or any other kids, and so those charges were dropped. But that was a pretty confronting and traumatic experience. At that point, Tamara genuinely believed that I had been committing a plethora of sexual offences outside of therapy, that she had been effectively trafficking me. So when I went back to therapy, she was all apologetic, and, you know, she took me back on as a patient. And that for me is like speaks volumes. Like, why did she do that? You know, if she didn't have some other ulterior motive other than her own personal agenda, but that's just, I don't know for sure. It's just something to consider. And she realized that she'd failed. She hadn't effectively trafficked me, and so she had a job to do, and she needed to do it better. So I had developed basically a technique that I did. I would go to a park, or I'd spend time with, you know, children, and I would engage with them, and I would form a memory, and that memory was based on fact. And then I would build on top of that memory a sexual lie, and I would go to therapy and discuss that with her. So she thought that I was committing sexual acts with children, but in fact, I was just lying to her. But because she was such a good read of people, it was built on truth. And in that way, I was able to manipulate and trick her, because I was just trying to make it through and figure out how to effing leave this situation. And as time went on, I got more and more scared. And she revealed more of herself to me. And I started to begin to realize that she was far more powerful than and well connected than I knew.
Ash, how old were you? How old were you when you? Okay, well, let me first start by asking. I'm assuming you also had shut off memories, and your memories started coming back at a certain age, in a similar way to other trafficked survivors, right?
Flashbacks, yeah.
Okay, how old were you when you started remembering what was going on? When you were in hospital, when you were for that year, did you at that stage already know the extent of the abuse and the satanic, the evil that was going on in your family? Was that clear to you already at that stage?
No, not 100%. However, I was constantly having flashback nightmares where I was waking up screaming in the middle of the night. You know, I had nurses running in, and they'd say, "It's okay, Ash, you know, the fire's over." And I was like, "It's fine. I'm not dreaming about that." So it was always on my awareness, like on the outskirts of my awareness, that there was satanic sexual abuse, but I didn't know for sure the extent of it until later. And I think this mirrors other survivors' experience of when you get into a situation where you're safe, that's when you start to have flashbacks and just experience and feel all those feelings. Yeah. So I was not aware of the extent of the trafficking at this point while she was re-trafficking me, essentially. And she was somewhat successful in what she was doing. So it was very, very challenging time for me as a sexual assault survivor, to feel as if you are a danger to children, as if you are a perpetrator. It's just the worst feeling in the world. There is nothing worse than that to me, than feeling like you're evil. And it was a very challenging and very hard time, as you can imagine. So there's like, police investigations going on. I'm, constantly fighting back. She's trying to admit me to hospital. She's constantly trying to put me in the mental health system. And each time I've engaged with the mental health system, like, she sends me up to hospital because I feel like leaving or I won't engage in a sexual situation with her. I remember one time I refused to masturbate in front of her, and she got the ambulance involved, and they took me up to the mental health ward. They took me up to the Princess Alexandra Hospital. So why this is important is the Princess Alexandra Hospital is basically, in my opinion, one of the worst mental health wards in Brisbane. And what they'll do is they transfer a lot of patients to the psychiatric prison, the Park Centre for Mental Health. They'll put a number of people on involuntary treatment orders against their will, and they can do a lot to people under those, under law by that. So she sent me up to the PA. She had a lot of connections at the PA. And, I just really, I was too of sound mind, fortunately. I never really had any mental health disturbance that was biological in its basis. So I remember one time I was sent up, this time that I was sent up there, I had like an iPod. This is way back in the day. I had like a fancy iPod that could store photos and stuff on it. And I went in, I got a mental health assessment, and I was like, I don't need to be here, mate. Just discharge me. Don't want to get admitted. Not interested. And he basically said, well, I just don't want you killing yourself, because then I'll be legally liable. So you've got to promise me you're not going to do it, because I don't want to get in trouble. This is kind of this ridiculous attitude to mental health that they've got up at the public mental health ward at the PA. It was just a disgrace. Anyway, I had to put my stuff in like a locker when I went into this initial assessment. And when I went back out, my iPod was missing. So I went up to the counter and I said, look, my iPod's been taken. And they were like, at the counter, they were like, no, it hasn't. You're just like mentally unwell. It hasn't been taken. And I said, put my iPod here now, or I'm going to call somebody and make a formal complaint against you. And he was a bit shocked, and he just quietly, wordlessly got my iPod and put it on the counter. And I grabbed that iPod and left. There's been a plethora of cases of sexual assault, and a number of other offences that have occurred over the years in the PA mental health ward. I was well aware of that, didn't want to get admitted there. So, there's issues within the mental health system, but as time went on, I understood that Tamara was very well connected within this system. And I learnt more and more as time went on how well connected that she was. I knew that she worked in prison in her 9 to 5 because I saw her in her private practice outside of ours, but it wasn't until the very end that I learnt that she worked at the Park Centre for Mental Health. She's the senior clinical coordinator at the Park Centre for Mental Health, which is the psychiatric prison in Brisbane, which houses some of Queensland's worst offenders that commit offences often when they're psychotic, and they can't be put into a normal prison because they are such a danger to the community because of mental health issues. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit off track. In the end, there was a fundamental flaw that was made. So all of this is going on. Things are getting worse and worse and worse. I'm getting very resistant, but ultimately I'm being worn down. And I was getting to the point where I really felt at some point she's going to break me completely, and the programming is going to be effective. I'm going to become a perpetrator, which for me is my worst nightmare. I'd rather die than that happen to me. So I was really, really considering leaving. And this was just like an awful, awful thing to consider, but it was something that had to be done. And really, the night came when she made a fundamental mistake. And because I was stressed out and she was very controlling and that kind of thing, I was eating a bunch of food. I've chucked on about like 12 kilos. So I got a little bit pudgy, you feel me? And with pudginess, the dosage with drugs changes. So I went in for therapy one night and the usual thing happened. But this time she'd given me either an incorrect dosage or we'd been in the sexual situation for too long. So this is nearly 2 years after I began treatment with her. I was 21 years of age by this point. And basically what happened was at this point, I had my suspicions, I had my worries, I had flashbacks, I had nightmares, but I didn't know for sure what had been going on. It wasn't until this night that I learnt the truth, and that was I basically woke up and sorry, it's hard to talk about. I've been through a lot worse in my life, but this is was just really challenging to cope with. And I had something over my eyes, and I believe it was, she always used to wear this piece of silk because she wore a high ponytail and she wore it in her hair. That was covering my eyes. And she was on my face. I was lying face up on the couch in the therapy room. And so she was like sitting on my face, which was fine. But my pants were around my ankles, and I heard a little voice of a little boy of about 3 or 4 years of age. And Tamara was directing him to perform sexual acts on my genitals. And as I was waking up, I called out to him and I said, you don't have to do that, darling. It's okay. But it just came out in a jumbled groan because I was just so drugged. It was that point that Tamara, ceased the sexual assault, so to speak. And she made arrangements for the child to leave. She called the mum. And I heard the bell ring in the office, and a mother's voice. And Tamara said, the mother said, sorry, oh, thank you so much for looking after my son. And, Tamara said, no worries, anytime. I hope you had a wonderful night doing something for yourself. And prior to that, she said to the little boy, now your other mummy's coming. So you're going to leave mummy and go home to your other mummy. So that's what she'd said to the little boy. So she'd obviously engaged him in that programming as well, in the very similar beta programming probably. And they left. At that point, Tamara came in and she said, in her very beautiful, gentle way that she always said, she said, it's going to be okay, Ash. It's over now. You can relax. You can go back to sleep. Nothing else is going to happen. She was being truthful and honest. I believed her, and I fell back asleep. I was just exhausted and could barely keep my eyes open. When I awoke, it was sometime later, probably, I don't know, minutes had passed, maybe 45 minutes. And she was humming in the kitchenette in the office. And she was in a really, really happy, positive, good mood. And I just felt very out of it. I looked at the time, it was very late. Even though it was the last session of the night, it was really late. And I said, Tamara, what are you doing? Like, what happened? And she said, oh, you fell asleep, babe. Like, it's no worries at all. Now, at this point, I've got severe insomnia. I've had severe insomnia my whole life. So if I can get an hour of sleep, it's fantastic at this point. A couple of hours a week would all I would ever get, be all I would ever get. And so I was like, no, it just something felt wrong. Something felt really, really wrong. I just was like, no, something's not right. And anyway, I got my stuff and I got myself together, and she walked me out to the door. And it was the first time that she told me that she loved me. And that was a very special and meaningful moment to me. And she leaned in very, very close to my face. And it was clear to me that she wanted to kiss me, or she wanted me to kiss her. But at this point, I didn't want to get her in trouble. I didn't want to compromise her career in any way. So I didn't kiss her. I just turned and left. And as I got to the stairs, I turned back, and had obviously been watching me leave. And I just blew her a kiss, and she caught it and went to her lips, went to her heart, and then I left. And that was a very special moment. But I skateboarded everywhere at the time. I was like young and always skateboarding, and I tried to skate away, but I was just all wobbly. So the dosage of drugs that I'd been given was a lot higher than normal, and it had gone on for too long, and she'd made a mistake. And in the subsequent days, I just started getting really, really bad flashbacks of the abuse. I could no longer accept that it was a mistake, it was a misunderstanding. It became very, very clear to me that this was all an intentional programming from the very beginning, that she'd groomed me, that she'd drugged me a number of times, and I began to get heaps and heaps of memories of sexual abuse involving children in the therapy room involving her. And it was very traumatic and very awful. And that was when I decided it was time to leave. She knew something was wrong. I kept cancelling sessions. I got myself into a group program, and in an effort to be like, hey, tomorrow I'm going to leave. And I thought she'd let me leave. So we set up a final therapy session. She knew there was a risk of me leaving. So what she did was the patient before me, she put the mother and the son. There was actually 2 kids. They were twins, because my brothers are twins. So she obviously wanted to replicate that situation by putting a twin in a sexual scenario with me. And I saw the child, and I knew immediately this was the child. And her reasons for doing that was she thought that I would think, oh, I'm a pedophile, I need therapy, that would get me back into therapy. But what it actually did was, it was very transparent and apparent to me, no, this is what you're trying to do, I'm leaving. So I've gone in as a 21-year-old to have an adult grown-up conversation with her about terminating therapy. I said, thank you so much, Tamara, for everything you've done. You've been a wonderful therapist. You've been incredible. You've helped me so much. And I genuinely meant all of this. I thanked her for everything. She'd given me so much. She'd given me the gift of a parent that loved me. I really appreciated that. But now it was time to go. And I said, I've been accepted into a group therapy program. I'll engage in the program and I might come back afterwards, hoping and praying that she would let me walk out that door. And what she responded with stunned and shocked me. She said, she got up, she listened to everything. She was very calm as usual. She got up and she said, you're not leaving and you never will leave. I'm calling the police. I'm going to make sure they take you up to the PA hospital, and I will make them give you ECT, which is electroconvulsive therapy, until you forget this idea, this stupid idea of leaving altogether, because my patients never leave me. And then she left the room. I just was stunned and shocked, and I just didn't know what to do. I started shaking, packed up my stuff, got it in my pocket, went into the reception and paid, and just sort of was just waiting around trying to think of what to do. I was thinking what to do. I just paid for my session. I was thinking, how much money do I have in my account? Can I get on a plane? Well, where can I go? What time is it? It's late at night. What flights are there? Because, the police are going to come get you. There's a mental health, the way it works in Australia is like you put a call into the police, the patient's mentally ill, you go take them up to the hospital for assessment. I know that she's got connections in the hospital. They're not going to listen to what I say at the PA hospital. Other hospitals, maybe they'll listen and I can convince them to discharge me. No, I'm going to be put on an involuntary treatment order. And at that point, I knew that an involuntary treatment order, so it lasts a year, and you are forced legally to subscribe to whatever treatment is given to you. And I just thought, she's going to break me. She'll break me. And I will commit sex offenses. I will become what she wants me to become. And then she will achieve her ultimate goal. And her ultimate goal is to have me charged with child sex offenses, to have me moved to the Park Centre for Mental Health, where she can treat me indefinitely. So I'm sitting there trying to figure out what to do. I can't figure it out. And she said, we're going to leave. I closed the door. I said, you're not leaving. that's an offence. That's a criminal offence, deprivation of liberty. I'm just trying to figure out what to do. I wasn't angry. Fortunately, thank God, my childhood in trafficking, I'm very calm under pressure. This is an emergency. I thought, who can I call? Maybe I can call an adult figure, you know, a parental figure, someone that can help. I'm going through my mind, who can I call? There's no one I can call at this point, you know. And then Tamara gets on the phone to my parents to get their approval to put me on an involuntary treatment order. And at that point, I knew, with her saying that I was psychotic and needed that order, with my parents agreeing, with my history and everything that I've been through, my father's very, very convincing that I was in serious trouble. And I knew that I would never, that would be it for me. You know, the Park Centre for Mental Health is, yeah, I'll talk about that in a minute. But it's very, very hard to get out of that place once you're put in there. And yeah, you're put in there indefinitely. It's not a nice place to be. So I basically came up with a plan, and this plan was, well, actually, wait, we're sitting there. She called the police. So the police station's on that road, and said, like, I've got a patient here that needs to be taken up to mental health, and told them the situation. They're on their way. They left. They're on their way. They're less than a kilometre away. And I basically decided to engage in a physical assault. Now, to be clear, I'm not angry. I'm not furious with her in any way. Not at all. It was a strategic and intentional plan in a state of emergency. When the police arrive, they will arrest me as a criminal. They'll be frustrated and annoyed at my criminal behaviour, and they refuse to take me up to mental health. And that's exactly what happened. So yes, I committed an assault on Tamara. It was an unprovoked assault. It was an all-out attack. She didn't deserve a single bit of it. She did nothing wrong. I take full responsibility for my actions. There's no excuse for it.
I honestly think, Ash, I mean, when you say, I think that it was completely provoked. I think she provoked you for years. I think you were pushed in a corner, and you literally did the only thing that you knew how to get out of the situation. So, I mean, she's obviously a masterful manipulator, thought that she had you right under her thumb. And I'm super proud of you for doing that, because that was really, I mean, wow. I sit here and again, I'm mesmerized by what you're saying. It's amazing to me what you've been through and how you've dealt with that, you know, how street smart you have to be to deal with these psychopaths. There's no words I have. But anyway, I mean, I think, you know, I don't know why you need to feel the urge to blame yourself for that, because it sounds to me like you are. And there's absolutely, I think you did exactly what was needed in that situation. After she had really the moves that she did.
But I do want to.
It feels like you were very much guided too. I just feel like, you know, you were just guided in that time by your higher self. Just what option do I have? Like, you're just like, there's nothing that I can possibly do. And there was a solution. And look what it prevented. It's kept you out of that awful place.
Exactly.
So such a close call.
A decade of freedom. I mean, I just look back and now think, I've thought about this so many times. What could I have done differently? Because it was just awful. That's the other thing, is like, yes, when you're in that mode, because of the way that I grew up, I've helped clean up bodies. I've done a bunch of stuff as a kid. You can go to a state of objectivity and commit an unprovoked attack. However, the feelings and the emotions behind that, essentially beating the shit out of somebody unprovoked that you really feel is your own mother, who you love and adore, who you've had a sexual relationship with for 2 years, is just a nightmare. That was just awful. It's something that I cry about every week. I normally cry 2-3 times a week about that attack. I've never gotten over it. Punitive measures are not needed. It was just horrible. And I will never get over it. It's so sad what happened. It's just heartbreaking. And, you know, I've had people say to me, not people, but like when I've spoken about it with a therapist, like, oh, she deserved it. And it's like, well, it doesn't really matter. As I've spoken before, I don't believe in any of this kind of violence being justified or anything be deserved. It was a means to an end. And I took no pleasure from it at all. It was just awful.
But I think at the end of the day, if you're looking at what was, you know, what was stacked against you, I mean, you know, she had to be stopped. That's the way I see it. She had to be stopped. It wasn't just you she was doing this with. It's clear, as you say, from your memories that were coming up for you in your time of therapy with her, with other kids. You know, she was a groomer, a programmer, obviously had that happen to her, but has never cleared to me is not out of the system at all. So, you know, my question there is that what, were you supposed to just roll over and play dead and have them haul you off to the mental institute where you'd be under her evil for the rest of your life? I don't think so. I don't think so. You know, and I think at the end of the day, you got to look at what your options were at the time. And
Correct.
I am no advocate of violence myself, but honestly, I think in certain situations, you absolutely have to defend yourself. And if that means that you've got to be violent in that moment because you need to defend yourself, then that's what you have to do to defend yourself. And I'm not just thinking you alone there, because God put you on this earth for a reason and a purpose. And if your purpose is after that to create awareness so that thousands of kids are saved, literally, then that's why you needed to beat the living crap out of her so that she could actually be the one that has to now, maybe for a while, sit and reflect on her actions. And my point is that I believe what you were doing there, freeing and yourself, defending yourself after years and years of manipulation, and also for the betterment of everything in society, you really needed to create awareness and to save children, shine light on these evil places. So if that was the only way you could do it, that was the only language she understood, then you spoke her language. And I think you have to realize it's not your nature to do that. But in that moment, we are called to sometimes act against what is truly innately good for the betterment of humanity. That's the way I see that situation. You've bettered humanity by exposing her.
Thank
Too
you.
many of her
That's
around.
Summary. Yeah, and I very much feel the weight of the responsibility for the situation. And what subsequently has followed is I've tried and done everything within my power to stop her. And I'll touch on that a little bit. Trying to help patients, running an investigation into her practice. Yeah, this is not something that she just did to me. Look, at the end of the day, I'm not just a pretty face, and there's a lot more pretty people out there than me. There's a lot more targets, and there's a lot more people that she would be more sexually attracted to than me. And so this is a long-standing pattern of behavior that she's been engaging in now for I don't know how long, but since me, this practice has continued. She has continued to sexually abuse patients and her patients' children and her patients' younger siblings. And I have determined that by running my own investigation into her practices. But I will just quickly jump back. So, sorry, this is going on a little bit long. So the police arrived. They said, "What the fuck, bitch?" That was all that I heard. And then I was tackled into a cupboard and they said I was resisting arrest. I didn't even know what the hell was going on. I was like, oh, it's the police finally. So as soon as I realized it was the police, I stopped fighting because I didn't know what was happening. And I was very calm. The police were like, the male officer was like, he tried to I still have some calcification in my elbow. So he tightly put the handcuffs on and he was like, I said, stop, mate, because you'll snap my on the nerve and I'll never be able to use my hands again. And he said, well, maybe you should have thought of that before you did what you just did, mate. And I thought, well, you know, you've got no concept of this situation, but I understand that you're triggered, upset and angry. Fair enough. So they hauled me into the waiting area, and I was very calm, cool, collected. An officer watched over me. She goes, don't run, mate. And I said, why would I run? Thank God you're here. That's all I said. She was like, what the hell? And then Tamara's in the next room having a chat, and she's having a full-blown argument. She's getting angry and angry. And it's very rare that you actually hear her angry in her tone of voice. She's very measured. And the officer's saying, Ash is a criminal, needs to be taken up to the police station. And Tamara's saying, Ash is mentally ill, needs to be taken up to the mental health ward. That's the only issue here. Psychotic, psychosis, it's mental illness, it's nothing else. And the officer's saying, criminal, criminal, criminal. It's just they're engaging in a fight. And basically Tamara was losing this battle. And she did lose the battle in the end, thankfully. So
God.
The officer that was looking after me was like, this is a really weird situation. And she was beginning to get suspicious already because I was being very polite, respectful, and it was very calm. And she was like, something's not right. But he comes out and said, whispered in her ear something about stalking, obsession, terminating therapy. So Tamara basically said that she terminated therapy with me because of my obsession, my sexual obsession with her. It had become too much. And I had reacted violently. So I was taken up to the station, was interviewed. I was, you know, they did what police tactics. So, you know, police use sexual assault and rape just like they do in the military. It's an intentional strategy used to oppress and elicit a certain response. So they did an internal weapon search, stuff like that. And look, I just basically said, look, I just did all of it. This is what I did. This is why I did it. I didn't go into the history of abuse, but I just said, all I said was I wanted to leave and she wouldn't let me leave and I needed to leave. They couldn't really understand what had happened. And I was very overwhelmed with everything that had happened that night. I couldn't explain it to them, but it's fine. So I was charged, kept in the watch house, went to court. Anyway, push comes to shove. I ended up spending 6.5 weeks in prison. And that was a really, really fascinating and interesting experience coming from a middle-class background. I learnt so much about the prison system through that experience. And it's an important part of the story because when I went to prison, I went in there with all of her colleagues. So I got in there, and the first person that I met, essentially, I had a health assessment and a mental health assessment that they do with every prisoner when you get in there, with one of her closest friends.
Oh, wow.
And just a really, really lovely, ethical woman, actually. And I just said to her, I love Tamara. Tamara did nothing wrong. And I want you to tell Tamara that I will never tell anybody in this prison what happened in therapy between us. Now she goes, well, I'm still loyal to Tamara at this point. I'm still programmed and groomed. I'm still loyal. I did not want her to, you know, her reputation to be smeared. I still loved and adored her. I just wanted to leave the situation altogether and that's it. But I didn't want any harm to come to her. And I still feel that way. I don't wish her ill at all. And her friend said, look, I can't tell her that, but if she asks about you legally, I can mention that you're sorry. So yeah, I went in there for 6.5 weeks. I, you know, met all of her colleagues, and she tried to have me, this is when I learned about her position and her sway and what she really did. She tried to have me moved to the Park Centre for Mental Health, transferred, because the psychiatric prison is within the same grounds, essentially. It's very, very large at Wacol. Ground there, and she tried to have me moved. She tried to have mental health assessments, extensive ones, put on me, and I refused to engage in them. I wasn't having anything of it. You know, all I wanted was to escape. And yeah, a fantastic experience. You know, prison for me was just this eye-opening, incredible experience. I met some amazing people. I learned so much. You know, I remember even like an officer in the watch house tried to procure me to commit a bank job when he found out I had no fingerprints, that I couldn't be fingerprinted effectively. Just all this stuff as a, you know, middle class kind of person was just, you know, shocking. And I met some amazing people that were just, I was like, why are you in prison? I met like one serial killer. It was just crap. Like I couldn't believe the people that were in prison. It just wasn't good enough. And I became very objectively against the prison system and what it's being used for. We need prisons to house evil people, but the people that are in there, you know, a vast majority of them should not even be in there, in my opinion. And I developed that opinion from being in there. So that was an experience. They took me off my mental health medication. I was on like a antidepressant at the time. They tried to engage in a number of things to see my reaction and trying to elicit a mental health response so that I could be transferred, which is what Tamara's ultimate goal was, and that failed. On day 31, I was brought into the warden's office, lovely bloke, and he goes, you know, Ash, I've been thinking about you and I can't figure it out. You know, I said to my wife, nothing makes sense. You're one of the nicest, most polite inmates we've ever had. And you're constantly saying Tamara did nothing wrong. You're so sorry. You know, you're a piece of shit for doing what you did. She's an angel. And it doesn't even make sense. And I'm her boss. And I said, look, don't worry about it, mate. And he said, my wife said, how long is the longest time somebody has faked being a nice person? And he said 30 days. So it's day 31, he brings me in and says, well, it's 31 days and you're still a nice person. What's the deal? You know, he said, and he genuinely said, did something happen in therapy? And this is, you know, her boss. And look, I said, look, mate, don't worry about it. But anyway, I pissed off. Week 5, we had a serial killer brought in to the unit, and she became my arch nemesis, of course, because you guys know how I feel about serial killers. I take an objective, ethical, moral stance against them. And I was, you know, cruising for a beating and a brooming, as they call it in prison. But fortunately, legal aid got involved. And that was a seminal moment in my experience for me. Taken in and had a chat with the lawyer, Tom, lovely, amazing bloke. And he spoke with me. He said, look, how's prison? I said, it's great. I love this experience, made some awesome friends. He said, how's the food? I said, it's, you know, bloody delicious compared to hospital. He just went through the whole case, you know, it was all good, baby. And then he said, I'm going to leave for 45 minutes. And, you know, the guards and everybody prior to this point were being really weird. Like something sketchy was going on. It didn't make any sense. I thought they were taking me in to see Tamara, and I was getting really scared. So when I saw my lawyer, Tom, it was the first time I met him, but I was like, breathe a sigh of relief. But when he left, I just started feeling a feeling like Tamara was nearby. I could just feel her. I could just feel that she was nearby. And so I popped my head out, and there was a security guard there, which was weird. Like there was no need for him to be there. And he goes, get back in there, inmate. And I said, why? And he looked over to this door opposite, and that was when I realized Tamara was in that room. So I got terrified. You know, Tamara elicits this response in me of sheer terror, even though she's not physically abusive or anything. She just gets to me in a way that, you know, other psychopaths never have been able to. Effective programming. And I, you know, the door began to open after about 45 minutes, and I kind of was leaning back against the table shaking, and it was just Tom coming back. And he sat down and he was shaking. He was furious with rage. And this is a lovely ethical bloke, like I just met him, but and he said, Ash, I need to ask you a question. Was there ever abuse? Did Tamara sexually abuse you? And I said, like, mate, I don't know what I've said to make you think that Tamara abused me, but, you know, she never did. You know, she didn't do that. You know, I apologize if I've given that impression. And he said, it was nothing you said. And I said, well, then what was it, mate? Like, you were fine when you left here 45 minutes ago. And he'd just been talking to Tamara for 45 minutes. And he said, I've worked over 100 sexual and domestic violence cases. And the perpetrator always says the victim is a piece of shit and the victim always says that the perpetrator, something must have happened. They must have done something, they don't know what happened. They're justifying the perpetrator's actions and behaviors. And he said in this situation, it's the very first one where it's been a reverse. So that was a great moment for me. He got me out, and the rest is history. I had a court case going on for a couple of years. There was an obstruction of justice in the case. Tom was removed from the case when it was written in notes that I expressed to him that, yes, she had sexually abused me. He said that he wanted to go to trial. He wanted to talk about the abuse. He wanted those charges, essentially a lot of them dismissed. And then he was removed from the case. A private lawyer was put on the case just randomly.
Wow.
And I was basically strong-armed into not going to trial. I was forced at the last minute when we were about to go into trial to plead guilty, and he basically said, follow Ash wherever they go. Do not let them leave the courthouse until they sign this document pleading guilty to the crime. And so I was essentially strong-armed in that situation. I was weak. I was unprepared. I just, I signed it. That's my own fault, my own issue. Take full responsibility for it. But this was like straight after a conversation with Tamara. It was very clear and very apparent that my lawyer and Tamara were working together. She has a very important career, and she's testified in a lot of cases. She's overseen a lot of very, very important cases in Queensland. So she didn't want this information to get out. And in the end, I pleaded guilty, and I had a 7-year order put against me to have no contact with her. I wasn't sentenced to any prison time, 5 years probation. I completed that. I've never breached the order or anything like that. But I got away free. I've had the life that I've always dreamed of, and I feel so incredibly blessed and lucky to have had it. However, gone to therapy, began facing a lot of the memories to do with trafficking in my childhood and Tamara as well. I've had a lot of problems with what she did to me. It's something that it's been very, very hard for me to let go of. I'm not angry. I mean, emotionally, the trauma from it is very, very intense. And so I've made a number of notifications to the Ethics Board, the Australian Psychological Society. I've written to a number of practitioners that know her. It's not an attempt to smear her name. I just want her private practice closed down. I don't mind about her practicing in the park. What I really don't want is her procuring innocent citizens, programming them, turning them into perpetrators, forcing them into the park indefinitely. These are innocent people's lives and families and children's lives that are being ripped to shreds. So,
but what I'm saying, I mean, I don't think it's we're kind of running out of time. So
sorry,
it's fine. But what I just want to say there, it's not, I mean, if she's sexually abusing her clients, she needs to pay the price. She needs to, so it's not about you protecting her for yourself. It's really about what she's doing to others knowingly as well, and why she needs to be taken off the roll. She's evil. So, any vulnerable people that are going to be subjected to her couch, so to speak, are going to be programmed because that's her job. So it's important that people get to know what she's about. These are the people that we want to expose, not necessarily get violent with. I mean, she's got to deal with her own karma in the way that she needs to. But it's not okay that she's even remotely out there and she's being protected. Not at all. She needs to be exposed for what she's doing. That's the way I see it. This is why we have these shows.
Yes,
so that these people can come out. Yeah,
absolutely. So sorry, I'll quickly go into it. So basically, I've tried a number of legal methods. They've failed. I tried to go to the police. The police, for a number of reasons, they've got PTSD. In my opinion, the police have PTSD. A couple of their careers have really taken off because of their conviction of me. Because when the hell do you ever prosecute perpetrators? They never plead guilty to all charges. you know, and they also see her as one of their own. She works within this system. She is protected in that way. But so when it became very, very clear to me that legally and ethically nothing was ever going to be done, this is going to get me potentially in some legal trouble. I began running my own investigation. So for the last 4 years, I've run a full-blown investigation of my own accord into Tamara's practices, identifying patients and children that she's been programming and sexually abusing. I've spoken with a number of patients, tried to help a number of patients leave, and tried to get them out of that situation in an attempt to stop her. I've also done a deep dive into the park. I've mapped her professional network. I've mapped the people that work in the park Centre for Mental Health that are involved, that I believe are involved in trafficking. And what I have uncovered is that the Park Centre for Mental Health has been used to detain. This is based on first-hand accounts and second-hand accounts of family members, whistleblowers of a number of illegal operations conducted by the Australian government, whistleblowers of child trafficking, and they house a number of innocent people. There is a plethora of patients that sit in the park right now who are innocent of any crime. Some of them are on charges that are trumped up, that should never have been put on them in the first place because they're whistleblowers. Others are like the person that I could have been in that situation, Tamara's patients that were never ever sexual perpetrators to begin with, but have been charged with sexual offences against children, and they are being detained and subjected to horrific human rights abuses that nothing can be done about. The mental health court is a closed court. All of the decisions are not made known to the public. They release a number of decisions every year to the public through the Freedom of Information. It's not good enough. We need to have transparency within these systems. We need to open the court to media scrutiny so that this system cannot be used to illegally detain whistleblowers and innocent lives, subjecting them to programs long-term against their will for patients that don't even need to be there, people that aren't mentally ill, people that aren't perpetrators, that aren't violent, that are not a danger to the community. And we know that drugging people, subjecting them to repeated bouts of electroconvulsive therapy impedes their memory. It affects them long-term. I've met people that stayed at the park that said they spent the majority of their life crying now. They've got long-standing mental health issues, psychosis that they never had before they went into the park. They've got problems with their personality. They can never hold down a job. When you're released from the park, if that ever happens, employment is impossible. Employers will view you as this person could go psychotic at any time and commit a sexual offense or an offense, and so they're not even going to bother employing you. This system needs to change. I want to see policy changes. I want to see accountability within this system, and I want to see Tamara Smith stopped. Sorry, that's all I have to say. Sorry for getting intense, guys. I just had to end on that.
I absolutely agree. She sounds, I'm sorry, it sounds awful what she's doing. It's just the manipulation, the control, the evil.
Her.
It's yes. Completely evil.
Yes, and there's other people within these systems that are helping her and that are helping to detain other people illegally as well.
Yeah, I think we've spoken about this before, but with mental health, I think it's really important for people to recognise that World Mental Health and Australia's mental health system was set up by Tavistock. So, this is an organisation that pretty much trains all the alphabet agencies, the CIA, ASIO, and these are, part of the major trafficking arms of children. So we have Tavistock self-regulating their child trafficking system and also silencing any whistleblowers. So, it's really sad to wake up to the fact that the systems in our society are completely against the people and our children. So thank you so much, Ash, for being so brave and sharing your experience. It's just to go from what you've been through as a child and be thrown into that just corporate evil, just just silencing whistleblowers is just unfathomable.
Thank you guys for everyone. I apologize. And sorry for getting super intense at the end. I apologize.
No. I that's not intense. Have you seen me get intense? I'm horrified. I'm disgusted, honestly, that this person has done what she's done and is still doing what she's doing in the way that she is, because quite frankly, that is evil. That is evil. To have this woman come in and completely abuse your trust in the way that she does, establish this mother-child connection. And then, I mean, there's nothing more. I mean, anyone knows the mother-child connection is the strongest connection that you get between two human beings, right? And when that is tampered with, it's like it screws with everything. So, you know, she needs to be accountable. I've no doubt about that. And I hope that she sees the error in her ways and turns her life around and actually starts doing things for the good. Everything she's taken from the children, let's hope she has a change of heart and suddenly starts realizing that she needs to do things for the children and the rest of humanity as well.
I mean, that would be the dream, absolutely.
Yeah.
But you know, as recently as a couple of weeks ago, you know, I've seen children entering her office, and I've seen her carrying toys that are traditionally used in the beta program to program children to commit sexual acts. So I don't think this is going to change anytime soon if something isn't done. And this system needs to be accountable.
I agree. Now, that's why I love programs like this, because even if it's one person who gets to see it, and it might be that one person that has the ability to change it and to bring this deck of cards down. So thank you so much for sharing your story and what you've been through. And wow, it's incredible. Honestly, I admire you so much. Such a strong, beautiful soul. And, you know, just being a healer for the world now, and that is beautiful. And I look forward to in the future as well. We were speaking about, and you know, you've also done a lot of studies on your dad being a psychopath, a sexually sadistic psychopath. I'd love us to maybe have a show sometime, talk about that. Also just talk about what you've studied, what you've understood about the people, the perpetrators, because I think I love about you is that you can actually be compassionate with your perpetrator at the same time, because really at the end of the day, that is what's required. That woman at some point was a young innocent child as well, you know, and has had heinous things occur to her. So we can judge that, or we can look at that with compassion. And I mean, absolutely, she needs to be accountable. There's no question around that. But let's hope that she, through that, because it's coming for her. It's coming. It's obvious it's coming, that she's going to have to take, you know, be accountable for her actions. So I hope that through that process, she does see the error of her ways and alchemizes her heart.
Hopefully. And
So, yeah.
I think she's shown that she has the capacity for good. She has the ability and the techniques to help patients. So I just wish that she would use all that she's learnt to help people, because she could be such an invaluable resource to change lives. And that's what I wish for. Absolutely.
From your lips to God's ears. And we will all wish upon that, right? Oh gosh, Ash and Gabby, as always, it's such a pleasure to have you. And I know we've gone quite a bit over our usual time today, and I'm going to keep it like this because it's such an interesting conversation. I know usually like this, with these kind of intense conversations, for the viewers as well, we like to keep it on an hour, just so that they can process what they're hearing. But today, we're gonna go with the whole show, guys. I was contemplating maybe splitting it in two, but I'm not gonna do that. I think it's an important story to hear all in one go. So thank you again, and Ash, look forward to having you back on our channel again. God bless you, take good care of you, and just all the wonderful things that life has to offer. May you be receiving that as well. And Gabby, as always, those wishes go for you too, and to all of you watching. Okay, guys, thank you so much. God bless you all. Take good care of yourselves. And if you haven't already, please give us a like, a share, and a subscribe. Share, share, share. This is the important stuff that needs to be shared. This is how we heal our world. This is how we, by hearing these stories and these names, this is how we weed out the debris or whatever you want to call it of our society where we expose, it's important. So thank you so much. Take good care of yourselves. And if you haven't already, give us a like, a share, and a subscribe. And we'll see you very, very soon. Thank you so much. God bless you all.